Here at the Customer Catalyst Conference, I'm delighted to welcome a fully customer-led co-creation example right out of the commercial playbook. I'm delighted to welcome Remco Duchhart, Store Format Development Manager at European supermarket giant Albert Heijn, and Maarten Pieters, co-creation lead at Signify. Remco and Maarten are leading the way with innovation and ideas driven by customers and share their journey to success.
So if I may, Remco and Maarten, but Maarten to start perhaps, please. How would you define co-creation and its benefits?
It's a great question to start off with, Toby. Thanks very much. So the thing with co-creation is that it's quite a large world in which a lot of things actually happen. So let me just try to explain this in a very simple way. So in essence, it's about collaborating, creating together, right? That makes sense. But the question really is, how do you then do that? That's where things go wrong. So a lot of people talk about co-creation, and a lot of people think that they are co-creating, and in essence, they are right because they are some way collaborating. But it's always a question of when is co-creation or when is collaboration most effective, right? When you get most out of it. So when you then look at an effective way of co-creation, you're looking at collaborating together throughout an entire process, basically an innovation process, or let's say a relationship, as it were, because of course with Albert Heijn, for instance, we're not continuously creating together, but we've got a longer relationship, we've got a partnership. So within that context of that partnership, we're continuously working together, we're continuously learning from each other, we are connecting, we have moments where we share things, and we, you know, it kind of blurs, let's say, the borders between us and them. And it's not really about us and them. It's like, well, you know, yes, we are our own entities, and we all have our own, let's say, purpose. But we are at certain moments on that same journey, and then there is not really a difference. So it's not working against each other, it's working with each other. Now, adding to that, it's very important that throughout that journey, people, we work together with, let's say, the people we are creating for, as well as all the relevant parties that are part of that whole ecosystem. So that means you're collaborating as well with, let's say, the consumers, the customers, at the core, but also all different people that are part of that, let's say, ecosystem, in terms of creating maybe a new lighting for a supermarket, right? You've got lighting designers, you've got people that are taking care of infrastructure, you've got a lot of different people part of that world. And all of these people, all of these different roles, they're all different pieces of the puzzle. And we have to find out what these pieces of the puzzle are at the beginning of that journey and collaborate together to actually put that puzzle together. And that's, if I would try to explain it in a very simple way, that's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Maarten, and I think it's based on a long-term relationship. I think that helps a lot, and I think Signify and Albert Heijn are working already for more than 25 years together, so that helps really a lot. But the most important thing is that you know each other, you trust each other, and you're really willing to share information. And of course, we both know we are both in a separate stock listed company, so we can't share, you know, some details. But you need to trust each other and be open. What's going on? And basically that's basically the success of this small thing behind me, this 3D printed light. It's simply one example of how that can work, yeah, that all started by some meeting one day where Signify was willing to share a lot of his, you know, innovations, and we were just sitting there and walked around at the high-tech campus, saw what happened, and suddenly there was this, you know, this moment that we thought, this is an interesting thing. We want to have something flexible in storage. It must be sustainable. Let's start. But it all started with, in this case, the willingness of Signify to share his innovations, and all of them in a different stage of development. And there's where it starts. And then you need to trust each other in the whole journey to develop it together.
And this is the beautiful thing about it as well, right? And I think, Remco, you touch upon exactly the core of it. It's all about building that trust, right? Yeah. And yes, we're open to each other. We learn together. but it requires a certain mindset. And this is also something that's transformed over the last years. We're a technologically driven company. We've been around for a very long time. We used to be very secretive about the things that we do back in the old day, but that no longer works, right? You have to be open. You have to understand why you're doing things. You have to collaborate together to figure out where that value is for all these different parties. And the value that we create together with Albert Heijn, together with our hold, of course, is different than if we would be creating that for a different company. And that's quite, even if we would be doing almost the same kind of exercise together, the output, the impact will be completely different. And that's the way it should be. And the thing is also, we're experts when it comes to certain technologies, when it comes to lighting. But of course, Albert Heijn, they're the expert on their experience, on also the needs of their customers, etc., etc. So, just simply saying it like that, it already shows that you can't do without each other. We cannot innovate, we cannot create meaningful innovations if we do not understand really why we're doing what we're doing, for whom we're doing this, and what the impact is that we're not trying to achieve, but what our customers are trying to achieve. And that's the focal point. And that makes co-creation not only an innovation process, basically, right? A way of working, a mindset. It's an organizational principle. So if you really want to embrace co-creation, you, as an organization, you say, look, everything that we do, we look at it from a co-creative point of view. And when we do that, everything will, of course, fall into place, because we know that we're doing things together. We know that everybody needs to have a stake in what we're doing. It's not siloed. It's not a few people working in a corner trying to figure out what's going on. Everybody has to have an open mindset, collaborate, figure out together what's going on, and walk that journey together. And that allows space for making mistakes, that allows space for growing together, and above all, it creates a relationship that is completely different from having a simple, let's say, goods and services relationship where you just sell something, right? The moment you interact together, the moment you create together, that relationship becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And if something doesn't work out at some point for whatever reason, because that's part of the game, you forgive each other and you start figuring out, well, how can we solve this? Because it's not a simple supplier kind of relationship. We're doing this together, we're in it together, and we're trying to figure out how to move forward together.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And in fact, if I could then ask, because that for me puts your finger right on the button of an interest point for me, which is, perhaps this is something for Remco to start with. If you're moving away from, if you like, the traditional products and services sales relationship, where you're trying to get the best price from your supplier, to this much more collaborative co-creation environment, can you explain a little about how you balance the commercial interests you have in terms of driving the business and profits and keeping costs down and so on, and then the benefits that you'll gain from taking this very different view about how to grow the business and about how to grow your commercial advantage based on customers and response? I'm interested in almost the tension between those things.
Well, that's a big and interesting question, Toby. I think that was a bit our advantage for this project. Because if you then bring it back to the subject, we want to create a very nice and flexible, warm atmosphere above our, let's say, produce and fruit tables. Then it suddenly becomes a bit smaller from that perspective. So that was, I think, that was the beginning of the idea, that we didn't want to put any, let's say, KPI to the project. Mm-hmm. And the only thing we said, well, we have something like light bulbs in this area now, and the only task is not to make it more expensive than that. So that was basically what Signify and I needed to guide a bit. But I would say that the biggest thing for this was, for both companies, I think, and that's what Maarten told already a bit, is that you became a team together. And let's say a few years ago, you would have said formally, oh, let's create a project team and schedules, well, etc., etc. And here we were, simply we became, like, let's say, young boys and girls, very enthusiastic about the product. What can we do with it, and how can we create it preferably ASAP, because that's what Signify said. You can design your own lamp, you can print it very quickly, and let's test. And I think was for me and for our company more interesting in this case than the whole big story about sales and EBIT, etc. This was from that perspective in the beginning a bit smaller, and I must say at this moment, and I think that's even more for Signify, because they started with I think 20 3D printers somewhere in the back room at the high-tech campus, and now it's a very serious printing factory in the southern part of the Netherlands, in Maarten. So in the end, in the beginning we didn't know that it would end like this, and now it's a serious business. We are introducing more and more 3D printed lamps in the bakery department, in another department store, and it now even becomes let's say a standard product. So even a standard spotlight or downlight can be printed 3D. So sometimes it's great not to have, I think, too many objectives in advance, because if you do that, then it's too much strict already, I would say. It's too much guided, and you don't give each other the space to develop and to give it a chance. And yeah, that's easy to say now, but I think that was the big advantage, that we said, we want this, let's see how we can get there. Okay, we want some inspiration, we want some designs, and I can change my background after this sentence. We started with maybe 40 different ones in one store. We installed it together with the team. I think nobody from Signify or us even knows whose design it is, whose idea it was. It doesn't matter. And we hung it up, and there we suddenly got another, let's say, gift, and it was the extra interaction with customers. And they gave immediate response about colors and shapes, and oh, what nice that you can change it, and it's cozy, etc. So sometimes you must be willing to have some surprises in a project as well. And in this case, it ended in, I think, a great success, because we have it already, I think, in 250 or 300 stores at this moment. But the other part of this approach is that you also must be willing to fail together. And if you fail, then you start all over again. And I think that's the most difficult part for, well, maybe for humans, to accept that you also can fail and need to adjust the planning and the project somewhere.
And that's another nice point as well, if I may break into that wall of failure. That wall of failure is part of exploring together, right? And any innovation process, any growth journey, let's say, at some point starts with exploration. So one of the pieces of the puzzle that we can add to this world is, we do a lot of research and development. So we invested in something that, well, we didn't yet know exactly what it would become. But people saw the opportunity, some very smart people had a vision, and, they started working on this, and that takes some time. But because we are who we are as a company, we have that opportunity, we have that possibility to do so. And then at some point, the right people come on your path, and then you start building together. And indeed, it leads to different places. It's right now as well, the 3D printing world. The beauty of it is that, so the process of getting to where we are right now is, of course, already a journey of co-creation, but the actual technology by itself also lends itself very well to do co-creative kind of activities. So if we're now looking at the 3D printing world and looking at how we're trying to make this successful for the consumer world as well, for people at homes, right? This is also something relatively new. We've got a platform called My Creation. People can interact there, people can create their own luminaire there, and that it by itself is a co-design, co-creation platform. There too, the consumer, the customer, people at home, they're the experts on what their home look like, right? What the home looks like, what the job to be dones are, basically. Why do they need this luminaire in the first place? They have an aspirational level. They all these different kind of elements, different inspirations that they have gathered overall for the last years, whether it's from a holiday, a hotel, or a magazine, Instagram, doesn't matter. We don't know that, because there are millions of different customer journeys, right? There is no one customer journey, especially not anymore in the world that we're living in, unless, of course, you've got a very traditional goods and services relationship. That's gone. It's an individual to network to individual kind of world now. And this is very different. And so the co-creative, co-design platform of 3D printing for, in this case, consumers, to kind of finish that example, lends itself extremely well to collaborate, for us to collaborate with consumers, but also with designers, people, you know, who are externals but have a lot of credibility on designing interiors, for instance, and us who are experts on the technology, on the lighting and what lighting can do. And you know, there's a lot of new things that light can do. It's no longer just about illumination. It's about creating that atmosphere as home. It's about making people feel happy, healthy. And it goes on to sending data, right? With Li-Fi, for instance. There's so many things that can happen nowadays, and we cannot do any of it by ourselves anymore. We have to collaborate with all these different parties, and the collaboration, the partnership that we have with Ahold is a beautiful example of that.
Thank you. Yes, and in fact, picking up on Remco's theme earlier and now yours, would you say that in some manner, if you're not having specific KPIs and business objectives at the beginning, but do you then see yourself in some manner as an incubator for growth for future opportunities? If you think about the scaling up of the original pilot, is that the concept of co-creation and collaboration, that actually that might become like a hothouse that will then eventually scale up to produce commercial KPIs based on this customer-led thinking?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. At the same time, it depends a little bit on the context. If, for instance, you have a project that's very, let's say, traditionally run, which is fine, whether it's agile or waterfall, or when you have strict KPIs, it doesn't really matter. There too, you can work in a collaborative way, in a co-creative way, right? So it's the principle of how you do things, and then you could say, well, we've got these and these and these KPIs, depending on what your organization requires or how the matrix works, etc. No problem. At the same time, when you start a collaboration, or when you have the opportunity to kind of maybe not be so traditional, but simply focus on creating that impact and try to kind of put all the other things around it a little bit to the side, it gives space to that, absolutely. But I think the interesting bit for me here is as well is that because we are co-creating, people build upon each other's ideas, they give each other energy, there's something growing there. And that's what drives people forward. So it's a very motivating thing to do for people. People enjoy being part of a co-creative or a co-creatively run project. And it's not for just the people today between Ahold and Signify, but it's also the consumers. People, and you've already heard Remco say it, there is interaction with consumers, customers in different supermarkets. And if, for instance, these luminaires can create also a better relationship with the consumers of Ahold, for Ahold, that's a beautiful situation. So it's not just the luminaire. The luminaire is simply a way to achieve something else. And in this way, they've managed to benefit from not only a nicer environment in terms of how it looks and how people react to that, but it also allows them to have a deeper relationship in a different way that they haven't done before. And I think that's the added value. And you should always look at it from that point of view, because of course LED lighting equals less energy cost. Sure, these things are also important, but there's other big KPIs, other benefits, and I think if you want to define what the right KPIs are, you have to also explore actually what it could become.
Yeah, I agree, and sometimes it helps in to start the project a bit, or the co-creation a bit, on a bit smaller scale, and then the one thing was trust each other. The other thing is you need to get some trust from your company as well. And that was what we got here. So it was like, give us a chance. We both see and feel that there's something in this. We need, and that's, and I know for some, let's say, people with their backgrounds, it's sometimes difficult to understand. But sometimes you have this feeling that you have something in hands, and but you need to prove it. And this one, I think this was one of those subjects. Everybody knew something about 3D printing, and suddenly we were together able to develop it and to show what you can do. But again, then then it's only one store and two stores. But we're still developing on this one, and then you come to the what I think Maarten means as well, to the bigger story around it, because we started somewhere, we know each other, we want a new type of lamp, a new series, and now it's basically that we can call or app each other, send some pictures. Do you like this? Oh yeah, well, we make a prototype, etc. Send a picture, so you can move on in types and styles. And the other one was that we found out that we are able to take them away. We also let's say engineer them so simple that a store can change the lighting element you see behind me, can change it themselves. We collect them again. That's basically a new project coming up together. We collect them and we can melt them down and use the materials again for new 3D printing. So, but did we know that in advance? Yeah, we heard the story that it might be possible, but we didn't work on that one, but we kept it in mind. And I think that's the interesting thing of how you move further then and see, I think, much more opportunities for this product anyway. And I think from, let's say, the Signify perspective, I think they found out that by doing it like this, you can design, because this was even before COVID, you can design from a distance. And Signify also used a London-based design agency. And then we found out, or they found out, oh yeah, but we don't have a factory in China or whatever. We can design it here, we send the design and we can print it there. So suddenly all kind of new insights. And that's, I think, maybe even the biggest, important thing of co-creating together. You find out that there are so many other opportunities in the product than this light bulb. Well, I think that's also a bit our message in this story, because otherwise it's all toned down to how can you 3D print a lamp together. Now the way of working and how you develop it helps you in finding other opportunities. And you can never bring that down to a KPI in advance. And you need to have and give some space in the beginning.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And in fact, because we're drawing slightly towards the end of our time, perhaps I could ask Maarten for you to comment on something that really I kind of pick up on that I think would be interesting for people, which is the element of fear. Because that cultural element, if you're used to products and services, to becoming a collaborative or co-creative link, I would guess that a topic you mentioned there, fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of opening up to your client. And if perhaps you could comment on that briefly, and then Remco, if you could explain what it's like to be that you're the buyer organization. So how would you encourage people to indulge in that co-creation to make it all possible?
I think, well, your first sentence is maybe the best thing to react on. You need to think, not to think that we are a buyer from a Signify product. It's more like you need to be able and to be willing to ask and give and ask and give and be open. And yes, in the end, we have a contract together. And yes, in the end, we need to pay for the light bulb. And yes, all those things need to be arranged. And I think that's maybe, that's the advantage of working with two big companies in this case together. That whole part is arranged, and that is arranged by, by our departments who are, very capable of doing this. And that gives us the space to do it like this and ask and give and ask and give and helping each other with solving the problems you have together. We want a better store. Signify wants a better business model. And in the end, we have expanded the whole range. And the funny thing now is that Maarten asked me a few weeks ago about some interview for the consumer, the direct to consumer website. And basically for our store that we open tomorrow, we've ordered 6 of those lamps directly from the website to install in our store. So that's that's how it moves. But it's more like you need, and maybe it's people will react like that's easy, that's simple, but you need to be open, you need to trust each other and dare to ask, because otherwise you will not get there. And for me, but it's more maybe my personal feeling, you need to have some structure. Of course, you need to have some minutes about what you're going to do together, but don't make it again like this project of how can we collect as much as possible yellow, green, orange Post-it stickers on the wall. Go for it and be open. I think that's the most important thing to do.
If an organization is really serious about this, find the people who believe in this and give them the space, give them the trust, give them the support that they need to really make it something that starts living in the organization.
Cracking. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much indeed, both Remco Duchhart and Maarten Pieters. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you both, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you,
Toby.
Thank you to Remco and Maarten for sharing their co-creation journey. It's all too easy for companies to become inward-looking, maybe thinking they know best. Pivoting your view to the customer perspective can bring unexpected results and inspire innovation that might otherwise escape. My thanks again to Remco Duchhart and Maarten Pieters. Now, let's continue the Customer Catalyst Conference.